Well, my full name is Denzel, Z-I-L, not E-L like Denzel Washington, but Denzel Eugene Jones. And I was born September the 21st, 1910, in Morrow County. It really wasn't in a town. It was up on one of those wheat ranches, just about halfway between. My dad always said I was born in Ione, but I really was born up in this ranch house. And Frank Anderson owns it now. Fact the matter, a legislator that was down here that I can't call his name right now, but he if you remember, he lit his helicopter on the lawn here a time or two. Then they stopped. Sumner, Jack Sumner. Yeah, he owned the place where I was born at one time, or his wife did. Well, of course, my dad was born and raised in Hebner, and his folks were all drowned in the Hebner flood, and that happened the 14th of June in 1903. And then we went to Montana up there, and my mother died when I was 5 years old up at Grass Range, Montana. And then we come back, and I went to the first grade in Portland, first grade school, and then we moved to the John Day up in Wheeler County. And I was there until 1924. Then we moved to Prineville, and I went to high school in Prineville. And while there, I rode racehorses for old Bertie Kidwell had one horse, and put him in with a couple horses from Portland old Jack Hoffman had, and they sent me to British Columbia, to Vancouver, and then Victoria, and then went from there that fall then down to Tijuana, Mexico. I was 15. I could do 97 pounds saddle and all. I went 2 years to high school, and then I had a stepmother that I couldn't get along with, so I had to leave. And so I just went up there. I rode racehorses for 2 years, and then my gosh, I wintered down on the Metolius River, down at the mouth of Fly Creek, and then I got to hearing about those old buckaroo tales, from over in Harney County, when the old Spaniards and Pete French and all of them, and so I got the urge to go over there, and I went over there in 1928 and never left. Well, he was alive, but he wasn't able to handle my stepmother very good. The easiest way out of that was just to get out. Right at the ranch that we bought, that I wound up buying, I went to work there for Joneses, who were distant cousins of mine. Went to work for Jim Jones, who later got to be a state senator, and went to work for $50 a month on my board. And then just kept working and scratching. They had 4 ranches at the time. They had the ranch down on the river that I bought, which was the railroad. When it came in there in 1912, well, they named it Jonesboro. And then they had 2 ranches at Juntura, and then one up above Druzy. And of course, then Jim was the youngest brother, and then his next oldest brother died, and so then they had to settle up the estate, and Jim wound up with the ranch at Juntura and the one at Jonesboro. And then I went into a partnership with him, and from 39 till January of 49, and we did pretty well and put some cattle together. At that time, after the Depression, the terrible Depression, in the early 30s, and the drought, which started in 28, after that got over with, the Depression, or recession, or what the heck ever you want to call it, it's pretty hard to do anything wrong. If you bought a cow one day, she's worth a lot more the next day, So we hit the times pretty good there. And And Jim had to sell, they had about 1,300 head of cattle, and he had to sell them all in order to get money enough to settle up the estate. So then him and I started fresh without any cattle. And we bought cattle and just started putting them together. Right, he furnished the money and I did the work. And it was just great because nobody had anything, nobody wanted anything. You know, we eat 3 meals a day, and you had clothes enough on your back. And but you know, cattle were just cheap. The government would pay $25 for a fat cow. You know, otherwise we couldn't sell them. And let me tell you this: during that time, after Roosevelt got to be president, why, he would pay $2 a head for sheep. It did, I mean, for the hide. And you just kill the sheep and skin them, and it cost you 10 cents a head to get them. I mean, if you hired it done to skin them, and then he'd pay you $2 for that hide. And I know Joneses had some sheep at that time, and they killed a bunch, and I hauled those carcasses off over and dumped them in a little ravine over, and I can show you those bones yet. And you could not give those carcasses to anybody. I mean, like the people on well, there wasn't any welfare, but the people on the county then could use some of them because they were fat sheep, you know. But you couldn't do that. If you did that, then you didn't get your $2 for the hide. So that's what it was like. But, you know, we didn't expect anything. We raised lots of the food we eat, and you had to just buy sugar and flour and coffee. You know, it's about all. You had your own meat and milk and all that. And you raised your garden, and you put it in the cellar and all that. Heck, we didn't expect any more. Well, of course, the wages, of course, started going right up. But let me finish that during the Depression, ranch wages were $1 a day, and you're bored. You know, and you talk about people now that get to, you know, they get what, $30 an hour now. We got $30 a month. And if we was lucky enough to get a job, and the people had money to pay us, even that. Then I worked for Dean Goodman up there after my wife and I were married, and I worked for $50 a month and boarded myself. Furnished my own fuel to heat the dang big old house that we had to live in. You know, there wasn't much left at the end of the month after that. And things began to move. Of course, I was about 34. 35 along there, and things began to move. And then, of course, the highway was come up through there, you know, and the highway was built through Jonesboro down there in 31, and then went on up to Jersey, and they were paying, I know, in Drinkwater Gap up there, that was kind of chalk country, you know, and I worked one day on that with a number 2 shovel. By hand, we was sloping the banks of that big cut, and that was for Turtling Construction Company. And that same day, then Dean Goodman come down and offered me a winter job, which I had to take because this was not going to last very long, you know, just till I got that cut done. So I worked there one day and got $4, which was good, and then went to work for Dean Goodman down at Junter there for $50 a month and board myself. But I had a wife and a child to take care of, so you didn't have any choice. You just did what you had to do. I stayed there all winter and the next spring, and then I got an offer to go up to Jersey to work on a ranch, and my wife cooked, and we got $50 a month and our board. So, guys, you know, that was a big deal. It saved some money there because we didn't have to spend anything. And things just moved on, you know, from there, and you just did what you had to do. See, in '39, Jim and I entered into this, Jim Jones and I entered into this partnership. And he just simply said, if you'll come down, and you and your wife, and and her cook and run the two ranches, and I'll use the ranches for security, and we'll buy cattle, and we'll set up a rental figure of $2,500 a year for the rent on these ranches, and when we get these cattle put together, well, we'll just split it down. And so in 10 years, we had put together 1,200 head of cattle, paid for by God. So then that's when he offered to sell me the ranch, and what we agreed to do was to sell 400 head of that 1,200 head, and split that money up, and then we'd split the other 800 head. That'd give us 400 head apiece, and he would take the upper ranch there at Guntura and sell me the Jonesboro ranch, and these 400 head of cattle we brought me $55,000, which made a good payment on the ranch. That is January of '49. But you see, we were there in during the '40s, and let me tell you, the irrigating system that we had come down, that's one side of the river, and then across the river, and they had an old wooden flume across the river. Well, it is about ready to fall in, so we had to do something about it. So Jim bought a highway bridge off of Union County up La Grande, just above La Grande there, a good bridge, 135 feet long, just which fit there. And by golly, we tore it down and moved it there and put it up across right there, and then put the flume on the outside of it. And we did that in '45, and we didn't get electricity till '44. And so, but in '45, we had electricity enough to run a drill and one thing and another out there when we was putting the bridge up. So we just went on from there, and then say I give $75,000 for the ranch, and I paid 55 down on it, so I only owed 20, and it only took me 2 years to finish that up. So. But like I said, it was pretty hard to do anything wrong then, the way that the things were going, even though old FDR borrowed the money to do all this with. It still happened. In '35, that's when we got the Taylor Grazing Act. That's the greatest thing that ever happened to us, because we had about 23,000 acres about twice that much of deeded land and federal land fenced in, and before the Taylor Grazing Act come in, there were lots of trenching sheep in that country, like the country's 50 to 75,000 of them, and they just run out there south of us and just eat all the range off, and they didn't own any ranch, own any base property. They never hired any help. They never paid any taxes or nothing else. They were pretty hard to deal with. So that's the greatest change that comes. And that, you see, that put those ranching sheep out of business. They either had to go buy a ranch, because the Taylor Grazing Act says you've got to have base property. They said if you have base property enough to run your stock for 5 months, we'll furnish you land for 7 months, that's what happened. So the sheep that were really ranching sheep, they just went out of business, and the others then they just stayed, and things they just kept getting better all the time, cattle prices, and we could. I got out of the partnership with 400, but then I could build up to 600, because we were commensurate for 600 head on each ranch, and with the BLM, and they were great. They only had 3 hired people in the whole Vail district down there at that time, and now I don't know how many they got, but anyway. We just went on and of course I had a son and a daughter, and the son, of course, he He was born in 32, so he was getting big enough to help on the ranch. And by golly, him and I run that ranch ourselves. You know, he didn't care for horses. He wasn't a buckaroo, but he was good with machinery, you know, which fit good. I could take care of the cowboying part of it, and well, he'd help, but then he kept all the machinery going. We made a great pair because we, you know, and I was giving him interest. He was earning an interest in the ranch. I didn't give him anything. And then he got married and started his family, and his wife didn't seem to care for us, so she come up. We built us a new house up above the road, and she come up one morning and said, well, you folks can either leave the ranch or I'm going, one or the other. So what the heck do you do? 5 little kids, and so we left. We moved to Ontario in 71. Well, it didn't really change as far as everyday work and things is concerned, except that I was my own boss and I didn't have to, you know, to do something to please Jim Jones or anybody else, and it was financially, you know. I served on the budget board, and I served on the juvenile council and things like that, you know, and on the local school boards and for 9 or 10 years and that kind of thing. You know, you just people ask you to, and if you're inclined to get involved in, you know, in the community and do things, of course, you naturally usually start at the local school board, you know, and you fight up there and for what you believe in, and then county-wise, you know, and you're always concerned about budgets, and I was on the county budget board, and so on. So I was just conservative and tighter than a bark on a tree, and so on. So you know, I just went on and put that thing together actually with hard work and a change in the times. I don't want to. You know, I don't want to take a lot of credit that isn't due me because, like I said, the times were just a change, and then you could do those things, you know. Because our daughter-in-law had run us off the ranch, and we were just sitting down there in Ontario doing nothing, and I was not completely unknown because I'd been involved, you know, in local politics around there, so the business people just come in and said, why don't you run for the legislature? And they said, now don't tell us that you don't have time because we know damn sight better. And so I thought, well, just as well. Didn't have anything else to do. So it never entered my head to get in politics such as the state legislature at that time. Well, I run against Nita Bellows, who was had worked for Tony Uturi, and it's pretty hard for Tony to support me because he liked Nita in the primaries. Of course, she was a Republican, but I beat her by 400 votes. And then I had a young boy by the name of Tim Gallagher that run against me in the general election, and we just. I didn't have any money, of course. I didn't know anything about it. I never asked for any money. Well, in fact, I never did ask for money. Only one term I sent out a few letters asking for money. But anyway, I beat Tim by 1,500 votes in '72, and come down here greener in a gorge. You know, didn't hardly even know where the bathroom was. It was unbelievable, Chet, the experience, so different. And you got to remember that I never had education. You know, I only went through 2 grades in high school, and of course, there's other kinds of education that you can get that you don't actually have to go to school to get it. And I got a lot of it right here. And you soon learn the people that you can confide in, ask questions of, and for one thing, the main thing and the biggest thing is to tell the truth and don't go back on your word. That's the key to being a legislator. And some of them don't do that, but by golly, once they kind of learn that you will do what you say you'll do, it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong, you know. There's always two sides to the issue, and if you just stay with what you believe in, and of course, but I fit my district real well because they're more conservative nature up there in Eastern Oregon, you know, and so that was a great help, and it was easy to legislate to please them because I was more or less like them. You know. Well, but Chet, look at the money you got out of taxes. You got $16 a thousand, and I used to know our assessed value, but I kind of forgot it. But would tell you how much school money you got, and then the money from the state lands issue, you know, and then they set up the basic school support issue fund, and then we had the federal forestry seeds, which there's 19 counties in the state that get federal forestry seeds, and counties like Harney and Lake were getting about $4 million, and of course that federal forestry seeds money was split 75-25, 25 to schools and 75 for roads in the counties, except for 4 counties, and Grant was one of them. It was 50-50 in Grant, I think Wallowa, and I don't remember the other 2. But anyway, but how it worked out was that federal forestry seats did not help the counties, the school part of it, because it come off of the basic school support. There was a statute, and I used to know the number of it, and I forgot it, but it just simply said that any money like that would be subtracted from your basic school support. So they really didn't benefit, except that it saved the basic school support fund because it offset it. But you see, with Harney and Lake County both getting about $4 million, and Grant too, well then that's $1 million that was going into schools that the basic school support was saving. Well, I had learned a heck of a lot, and the people that I was working with had also learned something too. You know, that I didn't propose things that were out of line in the first place, and if you got a reasonable thing that would basically be for the Eastern Oregon as well as the whole state of Oregon, then you get support from the other side as well as your own people. And then, of course, we didn't get in the majority till 91, and then we were in the majority in 91 and 93. I guess we've been in all the time since then, haven't we? I think after about 2 sessions down here, without Reagan, I think I learned pretty fast. I think he could see the handwriting on the wall when he didn't run again. Let me put it that way. He's entitled to his philosophy, and the people that supported him and so on, but so am I, and I think it just as well be left unsaid. Of course, dang it, Neil was, you know, he was all right. He was just liberal, and that was his philosophy, and he just run it that way. And I can't remember him doing us any good. There was a lady by the name of Freddie Webb Petit, and she was head of the Human Resources, Adult and Family Affairs, and she got kind of carried away and bought a bunch of expensive Jeeps and Jeep Cherokees and one thing and another, and we had to take her to task about that, and they sent John Yunker, give him the task of digging into all the things that the money she'd spent, which she didn't have. And yet, at that time, they had the whole 2-year budget that it's available to them. They could spend it all the first month if they wanted to, which she damn near did. And so then John Younker's report was, when he come back, was that, well, he thought she needed to be moved, replaced, or whatever. And they also set up the deal with, for only 6 months at a time. The budgets could only, you could only have access to money for 6 months, and then you had to reevaluate what you'd been spending it for, and so on. So, and that was good. And then, so she was removed from her job with Human Resources, and I think Neil took her into his office for the balance of her term, or his term, that is. And that was one of the big issues, because Human Resource Department's a big department and a lot of money. Well, of course, Paul Hanneman was here all the time, and he was minority leader one year, and of course he was on Ways and Means. And by the way, Hardy Myers, and we need to talk about Hardy sometime. Well, Hardy Myers was one of the most fair leaders we ever had, and even though he was the Democrat and so on, but he's the one that set up the proportionality rule. And that simply said that proportionate to how many Republicans there were and how many Democrats there were, there would be that kind of representation on the main committees, like Ways and Means. Well, then when Vera come in, she did away with it, and it come back to haunt her, I'll tell you, after we got in the majority. But Hardy Myers set that proportionality rule up, and you know that he appointed Paul Hanneman, who was a Republican, to chair a committee on Ways and Means, which was never happened before. I mean, you know, whatever party was in control, and they got all of the chairmanships. But I guess that's Hardy. He was just so fair, and he was in this particular subcommittee, and I don't remember which one it was now. It really doesn't matter, but he thought that Paul could do a better job there than any of his people, so he just put him on it. And he was speaker for 2 terms, and then Vera was speaker for 3 terms, and then Gordon Cairns was speaker for 1 term. I think that's when we took over in '91, and Larry Camel was speaker for 2 terms, and Larry was probably the most expensive speaker we ever had, even though he was a Republican. But he extended the legislative session for 30 days, longer than anybody ever did. And John Minnis was co-chair, overspent the budget by $170 million. And then Larry broke up the Ways and Means Committee, which is a joint committee, the Senate and the House, and created the Appropriations Committee, and put John Minnis ahead of everything. And there was almost five meltdowns in John's committee because he just couldn't run them. So old Larry, and he's got a plaque that John Kitchar gave him. What a great job he did. Well, I guess he did. He had a long time to do it. Had an extra 30 days. Let me bring in the Division of State Lands and the state land issue. And of course, we had Jim Hill on our side, and then was Barbara and Kiesling on the other side. And they was trying to put those state lands, those grazing lands, which there's 670,000 acres of state grazing lands, and they were trying to put them up for competitive bidding. Well, there's no way that we could have competed with the environmentalists and the people which would have picked and choose some of them and would have taken that out, and then it would look what it would have done to the industry. And we fought that thing until Kitzhaber got to be governor, and believe it or not, he helped us on that. And then I was involved in that, and we finally got it settled. Now we have two 15-year leases. We have a 15-year lease with an option to renew for 15 years. And we appropriated $3.5 million to buy out the grazing privileges on those lands, which was, that was the part that they were using, because these were grant lands, and therefore the statute, they interpreted statutes to say that you got to get the best you can get out of them. Well, we bought out to give $3.5 million, which went into the Common School Fund as a trust fund, to buy out the privileges to graze on that land, and that took the fiduciary responsibility away from them, away from the board, so that they didn't have to approach it then from the standpoint of the highest bidder deal. And it's been working great ever since. Oh, I don't know if I had any, but I never wanted to be a speaker or majority leader or minority leader, either one. And I just kind of wanted to represent the people that sent me down there. That's about all there was to it. Although, as you well know, the Ways and Means position is a prime spot. When you get there, you want to stay there and you don't want to lose it, and so on. Actually, we had a hotline, once a week, and they would congregate down at the City Hall, and that'd be of a morning early, like at 7 o'clock their time, and we'd just go over the issues, and they'd be people there, the business people there that were involved in these different issues, as well as the general public, and they would just tell me their views about what was going on, and I would tell them what had progress down here from our standpoint, and what was beneficial to us and what wasn't, and what I was going to vote no on. And that was great, and for some reason or other, I never got along with the newspapers very good, except Ontario I did, but Lake County wouldn't print my, and neither would Klamath, and neither would Burns, I guess I was just too far out or far in or whatever from my standpoint. Tilly down at Lakeview, she wouldn't even print my monthly newsletters, so hell, I just quit. And then Patty O'Connor, who was the reporter for the Herald News in Klamath Falls, she wrote a story and really benefited me, and the publisher didn't like it very good, so and then my opponent, who was Kathy Jordan at that time, she threatened to sue him over the article because it was taking her to task because she had told a lot of lies on me. And so the publisher down there, he then printed one on her side. So then I fell out with them, so I didn't have to worry about the papers too much. A lot of the urban legislators, I just thought the world of, and I'd visit with them about issues, and we'd just discuss the issues, and they'd have their points and I'd have mine, and we never did fall out about it, Tom Mason was one of the ones that real hard. You couldn't do anything with Tom. He kind of had his own ideas and kept them to himself until he got here on the floor. But anyway, generally speaking, from a general standpoint, a lot of the urban legislators were great people to talk to. What we were trying to do, Chet, was get equity. And we worked on the equity issue for years in Ways and Means, and how you do that. And we kept raising the amount per pupil. And like my last session down there, it was $4,320, I believe, that each student was supposed to get. Well, the problem was that there was a district up at Lake Oswego, and their cost was $6,000 a student, and there was one from McMinnville, forget the district, and theirs was $5,500. Well, they continued to give them that money because they had the boats down here. We couldn't. And as far as equity was concerned, well, equity was fine, if you could make it work, but then they kept getting their extra money, which they weren't entitled to, and they had some programs that they were paying for that was put in when there were tax dollars available for the district, and they just continued to do that. And we never had the votes to change it, and those are the issues that really get to you, And then we had the small schools correction deal, like the side house out there only had 2 pupils. Well, when you only got what the rest of the people were getting, so we had that small schools correction deal so that issues or a district like that could still hold school, and they would get some extra. I believe that about the highest district per pupil cost was up in Wallowa County. But anyway, Lake Oswego and the one out here at McMinnville, but we're over the limit that we had set for equity. We spent a lot of time on there simply from the standpoint of the way after ballot measure 5, they never had any money for maintenance anymore or to upgrade their schools, and then they poked down our throats the mandatory consolidation, and they began to do that then, and which never suited. Fact of the matter, that's what defeated Don Oaks. Don Oaks was from the district from District 59, and he recommended the consolidation of school districts down here and lobbied for it, and he never got back anymore. You don't do that up in Eastern Oregon and those kind of places. But they finally got it done, and they're doing it. They've done it now. They consolidated Willow Creek into Vail, and when you do that, then you eliminate a board. You got one big board that runs the whole damn county. The equity thing is great. We have too many administrators, and that's one of the big expenses, And if we could iron those things out, and then what I think we need to do, I think that if a district has the votes and the money to build a new schoolhouse, then I think they'd ought to be allowed to do it. But that should be like a 2/3 vote or something like that, not the plain old simple majority vote, but so you get the real feeling of the people that's going to be paying the bill. The way it is now, you can't do that, and you don't get money enough. The state doesn't have the money to take care of the maintenance issues or build new schools or whatever. So it's a constant thing. It's probably worked on more than any other budget issue, especially since. And then when the lottery come in, and people thought that it should all go to schools, but it don't say that. And the last session that I was here, the take was $750 million, and I don't know whether I think that's for the biennium from the lottery. And then in I believe it was 85, or 95, when Gordon Smith was president of the Senate, he got that bill passed, or it was actually an initiative or a referendum passed to take 15% off of the top of the lottery money and go into this trust fund every year. Well, if you're collecting about $350 million from lottery a year, then 15% of that's about $50 million that's been going into that trust fund. Well, this year it was a ballot measure which would have given $220 million to schools, but the people didn't understand it, so they voted it down. And what are you going to do with that money if you don't use it for? I mean, it was for schools. It says it's for schools, but what kind of? I mean, what kind of schools are you going? What are you going to use it for? And I think now that people understand it, I think if it was presented again, they'd pass it. And if they'd have done that, then the $110 million that they took out of school budget to balance this budget with could have been. They could use the whole $220 million of that and replaced it with this trust fund money. They didn't do that. We met with her as a member of the land board several times, and let me tell you what happened. We was meeting once over in the land office, and she was there, and she had to leave, and she voted by phone out of her car on that, which I questioned whether that's proper or not. So Kiesling, he was there, and Jim Hill was there, and Jim Hill voted against it, and Kiesling voted for it, and then she voted by phone up on her way to Portland, some damn place, to pass that issue that we were discussing, and it wasn't to the benefit of us Eastern Oregon people that was using the land. I can guarantee you that. But anyway, we after Kitsar got in, then he got on our side, and we got that all ironed out. But see, Barbara, that's just one of the few issues that she was so far out on the other side. Did you know that they attempted to recall her at one time? At that time, why the environmental issues were coming in, and of course, those are always there, and we're always fighting them. And of course, that's her philosophy, and that's fine. I've got no problem with that, except that she's supposed to be representing the whole damn state of Oregon, And I think you're supposed to look at both sides of it when you do that. I could talk to her anytime, but never did any good. She was governor when the first prison was built in Ontario, and that was $42 million to start with, and then I think they finished up at $370 million or something like that when they added the 3,000. Oh, it was just a small one, but anyway. But there's another thing, Chet, that we got into a real discussion and a heck of a deal over the sewer system with that president there, and actually the city of Ontario went back on their word, and I got on about that, and I really chewed them out about that, and told them to just make their word good. And see, they had agreed in the contract with the state of Oregon to furnish sewer facilities for the prison out there. Then they doubled their fee and tried to back out and all that. So anyway, we got it finally straightened out. But that was a heck of an issue, and the state spent a ton of money, like $600,000, trying to dig a new stilling pool or whatever you call it over there up on top and all that damn stuff, and that it was a waste. We just dealt with the issues as they was dealt to us, actually. And you do that. Now, I already mentioned the $600 million. And Ontario, just HC in Ontario, they complained that they were losing a lot of money, and they got $800,000 because of that argument. And then they got another $800,000 or so because of when they made the shift from ballot measure 5. So they come out smelling like a rose, and they had to hide some of that money around there for a while to keep making them use it again. But that's some of the things that went on there, you know, and that's my hometown there. And if I'd have known it, I didn't know that it happened until after it was all over with. But you see, we as legislators or legislatures had to deal with ballot measure 5 and the new deal, and what it did and what entities like the cities and so on had to deal with, you know, it all involved them too. But, so it's a different source of revenue for to run those. Anybody that paid taxes was supportive of it because they didn't really know what the outcome of it was going to be and so on. And my gosh, even my house in Ontario, you can't believe how it took about $1,500 taxes off of it. And the ranch, cut the ranch taxes in 2. Another thing that happened after that was that we got exclusive farm use passed, you know, and one of the things that was happening there was that people were selling out down in California and then coming up to Oregon and buying ranches, you know, twice the value that there was, and that's what the assessed value then was based on. So we got the exclusive farm use passed, and it was based on the ability to earn, and it's still on the books today. And I've often wondered, you know, why they don't try to get rid of it, some of the liberals. Because most people are taxpayers, and they would rather do it from an income tax standpoint than they would of a mandate for like paying school taxes. So yes, you know, even though it's a tough issue for schools because now it's down here, and when you talk about reducing the tax burden for schools or on us taxpayers from $1,600 down to $500, why, and like I said, I used to know the assessed value of the state of Oregon, which I don't anymore, or I forgot. But anyway, it leaves a big chunk of money. Well, what is it? $5 billion, isn't it? School budget's $5 billion out of 12. That's quite a whack out of the state budget. I don't like sales tax personally, and besides, if I was still in the legislature, I wouldn't dare support it because look what Ontario gets out of Idaho. God, you go over to Walmart or some of those big stores, Kmart, and count the Idaho licenses on cars that's outside of buying things there. Well, gosh almighty, we'd dry up and blow away if we had a sales tax. We'd lose that Idaho, those people from Idaho coming over. I've always, and I usually get in trouble over this, but I just think we need to live within our means. I don't think it makes a dang bit of difference how you get taxes. Income taxes are probably the fairest kind of a tax there is. If you make money, then you pay into tax, and other taxes tax people that can't afford it, and so on. And in this budget, why do people think that we're in a recession now, but why should wages still be up and all that kind of stuff be up? Dang it, there's an easy way to settle this budget shortfall is just cut things down to fit the recession. And that's what I'd be doing if I was down here. But that wouldn't go over very big either. But that never bothered me that much. Just continuing on with the old ones like Oregon Cattlemen and the Farm Bureau and things like that, and then Chamber of Commerce and the different social clubs there in town would speak with them or speak to them and ask them all that kind of things, and that's where you get the best information that you need to do what the people want you to do that send you down there, you know. Of course, the Oregon Cattlemen's Association and the Farm Bureau, they're the two farm groups that and then you protect the Extension Service and the Experiment Station, which we have one there in Ontario, and they do a world of good that people don't even know about. Well, I'm bitterly opposed to term limits, and let me tell you why. We were down at Klamath Falls, and Timms and Gene Timms and Bob Smith were both there, and they were campaigning, and they got on first, and they both supported term limits. Well, why would Bob Smith be supporting term limits? Christ, he'd been in here ever since 1960, someplace along the line. And so when I got up, I said, well, I'm bitterly opposed to them. I said, I'd be a hypocrite if I supported term limits. As long as I've been in here, it's fine for me to be in here for 20 years, but I don't want anybody else to be in here that long. And I said, damn it, the best term limits we've got here right now is the ballot box, and if they want you out, they'll take you out. It's just that simple. Not that there's just as many good people that's never been here as there has that's come, and they will still come, and so on. There's lots of good people, but this experience, you don't get it overnight. And like if you're going to serve 3 terms here, you just found the bathroom about the end of 3 years and begin to do the people that sent you down here some good. And if you're bad, hell, all they got to do is vote you out. Wally Priestley had introduced more bills than anybody in the legislature, and I got to tell you about him. When his bills, they were just not paying attention to them, and they did away with 40 bills he has all at one time in one motion, just a motion to do away with the 40 bills of Wally. Wally was he was one of the most far out people that you ever saw. He was bitterly opposed to the military and anybody that served in it. In fact, there was a Vietnam veteran that spoke to us up at the podium here, and Wally walked out in the gallery over there and stood there and booed him all the time he was speaking. Now, there was 2 or 3 of us who wanted to throw him out through one of them windows with the window shut there, but of course we didn't dare do that. But that's kind of and Wally used to live up in the lounge. In fact, he'd stay up there at night sometimes, sleep on the couch up there, and he'd eat up there all the time. And he demonstrated one time with a bunch down there on Broadway Bridge in Portland, and the news was out that he would threaten to jump off the bridge if they didn't do what they wanted him to, this far-out group that he was with. And so the next session he was back, and I said, Wally, was you really going to jump off of that bridge? he didn't like that. He didn't like that very good. But anyway, he was, I guess he must have fit his district because he was here about 3 terms. I guess he was here before I come, and then. But anyway, and Sid Bassett, he used to sit up on one of the front seats up there, right in front, and he had lots of good stories to tell. Old Sid did. But then he was from Grants Pass, and he was taken out, but but he was here for several terms. But and I've mentioned the people that was like. I jotted down some of them here, the people that I like to work with, and I've already mentioned Bud Byers and Jeff Gilmore and Dick Magruder and Paul Hanneman and Paul Walden and Hardy Myers and Roger Martin. He was a legislator. And, Vera Katz, she was speaker for 3 years, but she always treated me real good. She just treated me like one of her own. She'd put me on the e-board and put me back on Ways and Means, which is, I know that she must have got some static from her own people for not putting her Democrats on there, but I got it. I don't know, maybe she thought I was doing a fair job, but I remember I remember one time that the majority vote had to be a recount down in Klamath Falls on Bernie Agrons, and they had to do this recount. And if the count stayed like it was, well, then we took control. But the recount then elected Bernie by half a dozen votes or so. Got over here and just come running down through Ways and Means, hooping and hollering, and said, we won, you know. And so that extended her tenure then for another session. But one of the things that she poked that old House Bill 3565 down her throat her next year after when Larry's first year as Speaker, and that's one of the worst things that's ever happened. They don't give diplomas out anymore. They give Kims and Cams or Sims and Sams or whatever you want to call it. And you've got to make up your mind when you're in 10th grade what you want to do, and I mean what your major is going to be and all that damn stuff. And it just has never worked, and there's a lot of people that don't like it now as well as they thought they was going to like it then, but it's still there, so I guess they don't dislike it too bad, or they'd get rid of it. I think when you've got an issue, Chet, that's really important to your people or the people of Eastern Oregon or the conservative people, and you lose that by, say, one vote, well, it's pretty frustrating, really. And but you know, Staff Hansel, he was on Ways and Means. In fact, he was co-chair one year, and he sat right in one of these seats right here. And there was an issue with marijuana, you know, and they wanted to legalize marijuana here, and of all people, he supported it. And for the props that he brought in, he didn't drink. He absolutely didn't drink, but he went and bought a bottle of whiskey, and he had some cigarettes, packets of cigarettes, and a can of snus, and he put them all on his desk there, and he went all through this, you know, and he was supporting this deregulation of marijuana, and for him to go through all that and with his philosophy usually was quite a shock to all of us. But and of course that was the Tom Masons and the liberal element. They all wanted to legalize it, but I think it passed here. I think with Staff's performance that he put on, it passed the House, but it failed over on the other side. But anyway, and Staff then he went to work he was head of the executive department for a couple of years, and then he put in the rest of his time on his hog ranch. He never did come back into politics anymore. Of course, the caucuses, there's where the work's done. You know, you usually resolve everything as far as whatever votes are available in the caucus. And then, like we were in the minority all the time, we was always short 3 or 4 votes. So then the leadership then would, like the speaker, the minority leader then would go to the other side of the aisle over there and try to scrounge up enough votes to get your bill passed. And if you didn't, well, it just didn't pass. That's all. When I got put on the emergency board and then on Ways and Means, that's the basis of things. You know, if you don't have the money to run the state of Oregon, why, then the other things they don't matter much. But you got to have money to do the things that you're supposed to do. And I was on a subcommittee in Ways and Means with the state police, and they were having a squabble with the union at that time, and the union prevailed and had to pay them some back wages and raise their wages, and it cost a ton of money, like $150 million or something like that. And so they come back down there to get some more money, and of course we'd already passed their budget out, and they didn't have any. We didn't have any money to. But anyway, they said I forget what it was now, but it was a small amount. They said if you'll give us that much, we'll eat the rest of it. So they canned a bunch, or there was some state policemen that were about ready to retire, and they let them retire and never replaced them. So that was an issue, you know. Then the other issue with the state police was the fish and game part of it, you know. There was always a budget there that funded some of the, you know, I think 9 of their officers from the wildlife standpoint, and that was always tough to get because some people had the idea that the license should pay for the policemen there and so on. But anyway, that's the big issue, because your schools and your agencies, the Human Resource Agency, which is the biggest agency down here, and they're all involved around money, and they've just got bigger and bigger. And then, of course, Kitzhaber's his pet peeve is his health program, you know, and that's fine up to a point, but how far do you go? It costs a ton of money, and how far up the ladder do you help people, and how many things that's wrong with you do you, in that category, do you fund and all that? And that's been an issue this time. And, of course, he wants to raise taxes, which we would never do. And don't forget that in, what was it, 79, that we reduced the income tax down to 9%. You know, that was quite a thing. And the other categories, I mean, the top bracket and the other brackets, we reduced those some down too, and they've been that way ever since. But one of the other big issues is the retirement, and that's a pet peeve with me. And now, you know, they've always told us how damn well they were doing, but it was all on paper. They was buying bond or stocks, you know, with their surplus money, and when the Dow was worth $11,000, now it's down to $8,000. Well, they never got any revenue off of those. I mean, it was just worth it on paper. If you cashed it in, got the money, well, you had a lot of extra money. Now that those stocks are no good, well, now we're $8 billion in debt. The state of Oregon started taxing the retirees. It was against the statute, very plain in the statute, that you cannot tax a retiree. The state of Oregon can't, but they did, and they started doing that. And of course, there was a big hoorah with that, and so John Yonker came up with the idea that we would continue taxing them, and we would increase the benefits by 9%, which is the amount of the tax, the state tax. And that would offset then the tax part, and they could continue to tax the retirees then, even though the statute said you couldn't. Well, by the time they did that, then we had run up a bill of $400 million that the state of Oregon had taken from the retirees. And so then they paid it off out of the PRS account, and to the people that they had taxed, they paid them back this money that they had taken away from them. But you got to remember now that the 9% tax that they're taxing the retirees goes into the general fund, but the 9% increase in the benefits comes out of the PRS account. And I don't think you can do that. And Jack Solis he's the attorney for them, and he's about to come off the wall. So I suggested to Tom Butler the other day, I said, you know, one way to get some money back is to have the state of Oregon pay off that debt to the PRS, that $400 million, and quit taxing them, and and then cut their benefits back down 9%, which would help the PRS account, but I doubt if that goes over very big. It certainly did, Chet, from the standpoint of, you know, you just get to appreciate people more, and just as a civilian, like an old farmer, you never hear about the things that's going on with the different types of and groups of people, like down in, you read about it in the paper, but you don't really get into the details of it, you know. And you really, down here, you get to hear from all kinds of people. Like there was two ladies that come before the subcommittee. They were addicted to gambling, and intelligent-looking women, both of them. And they said, you just don't know what this does to us. And they were both addicted, and they had spent all their money and everything they could get and sell and were still gambling. And if you remember, we put a portion of the lottery went to the counties to help for gambling addiction, and then they ruled it unconstitutional, and I don't know what they're doing with it now. But how would you ever know that there's supposed to be 70,000 gambling addicted people in the state of Oregon? How would you ever know that, you know, if you, and I feel for those people, because it's, you know, it's a disease with them, I guess it is. I'm so damn tight that it would never bother me any, but then there are people that it just gets, you know, gets under your skin, and you can't help it, I guess. You know, I just thought, well, you know, I've been down there all these years, and I've done my part, and so why would anybody, you know, bother about asking me anything? But my God, the phone never quits ringing. I keep telling them that I don't have any whiskers left anymore, but then they still want me to do things, which I'm tickled to death to do, because I'm not. You know, I don't have anything to do really anymore since I sold my ranch and so on. So there is, you know, there's a wealth of knowledge down here that you acquire by being here if you pay attention like you're supposed to, and so on. So there's things that you can help people with. Of course. But you got two types already to start with. You got the liberals who believe that you should have a handout, and the government, whether it's federal or state or county, should provide it for you. And that's fine. That's their own business, except that if you're a business person, and that's what the legislature really should be mostly made up of those kind of people that's met a payroll and all that. Well, dang it, you just gotta face the issues. Now, why in the world would you want to raise taxes when things are in a recession? For God's sake, you ought to reduce them, if anything, because how's business gonna? And look at the big companies that's going out of business. Even, you know, Kmart was they took a Chapter 11 the other day, and look at Sears Roebuck. They've cut down. And Montgomery Ward is completely quit. God, how many more of those are there? And you still want to raise taxes? God almighty, why don't we just face the issue and live within our means, and if it comes back, well, fine. You know, and the salaried people, they want more salary, but what are you going to pay it with? Now, and this is one thing that I don't disagree with. You lay off a bunch of people. Why not cut all their salaries and keep all the people working instead of laying off a third of them and paying and raising the rest of them? Don't make it, you know. Of course, that philosophy wouldn't go over very big with the working people, but then it never bothered me. That's one thing that never bothered me too much anyway. I just kind of told it like it was, or like I thought it was. It worked so far. So you gotta face the issues. You see, when I was lobbying for the Oregon Cattlemen, well, they used their desks here for their offices, and they amended their own bills with tape, and they'd tape out the part in a bill and write in the new part and so on. Had that damn glue sitting around on your desk all the time. and then my first session down here, we went down in let's see, it's 60, that one down in the basement there, and they just took some fences, about 6 foot high, and fenced us off some offices down there, and your neighbor was right there. You could hear them talking and all that. There was a few offices around the edge that the old timers and the Democrats got. Now Wolfer was a young Wolfer. He was a freshman, and he got an office with a door on it. Of course, he was a Democrat, and I was a Republican. I got one with a fence around it with no door. Yeah. And then the next year, or next session, then I got an office with a door on it. And gosh, that was right uptown, And so then that's when they built the wings, and the wings cost $13 million, and then it provided us with all those new offices up there. And when the fellow from Portland retired, and he had a big corner office up on the 3rd floor, a huge office, a nice one, and some large space out in front and so on. And so Wynton Hunt, he was the chief clerk here then, and he kind of had the doing out of the offices, and Lloyd Kinsey, he was moving out of that office. So I went to Wynton and told him I wanted that new office there. He said, no. He said, Bill Markham gets that. He's got more whiskers than you have. And I said, like heck he does. God damn it, he's a freshman. He got beat once, and he's starting fresh now again. Wynn said, by God, you're right. You can have the office. So that's how come I got that big corner office up there. Well, I've already mentioned the lobbyists, but I want to really mention them because I have found the lobby to be, there's both kinds, of course, but then there's some of the best people that I ever met in the lobby, and they're just, honest, and I got so when I didn't have time to study a bill and all that, I just go to them and ask them the details of it. Like Fred Van Atta and Rob and Joan, Rob Douglas and Joan Buck, and Roger Martin. Of course, he's an ex-legislator, and John Brenneman, and those are. Tell you what's in their issue. They're lobbying for an issue, and God dang it, tell you what's in there. Not just what they want you to hear, but what all's in there. And like I just say, well, now, don't this do so and so? Well, yeah, if you really pin them down, then they will admit that that's in there. And those are the issues that you may miss if you, and the difference between supporting one maybe and not supporting it. And so they knew me and they wouldn't lie to me anymore. Well, I just telling you a while ago, I'd take a little John Barleycorn every day, not to excess, but that kills all the bugs in you, and I don't know if I buy my Fanny Meyer, she's from Winnemucca, and I have to take her down there once in a while. So, see, we're allowed two half-gallons of liquor from out of state, So if I get me, it's only costs about half as much as it does here in Oregon. The horse fell over with me. She was a cinch minder, and I didn't warm her up enough. And I just got on her, and she just fell over sideways like that. And I went over with her and hit her right on a rock, right on them short ribs there, and broke a rib. and I was just starting out in the morning, so I thought, well, hell, I would go on anyway. But that was the longest day I ever put in. Yeah, and you know, people that drive by said, "What in the hell are you doing up there on that house?" I said, "I'm shingling, can't you see?" Yeah, I was 97. I had cancer surgery, and they took out 12 inches of my intestines, and Rob and Joan, Rob Douglas and Joan Buck, they were nursing me around. I said, "For God's sakes, leave me alone," you know. And they wanted to drive me down here from my house where we were staying and drive me home. And I said, "Hell, I can drive." And I was back working in 6 days. But I'm pretty healthy yet.